Have you ever had a moment in your life where you knew if something didn't change, you weren't going to make it? Today's guest has lived that reality. Addiction, brokenness, rock bottom, but somehow his story didn't end there. Today, you are going to hear how God brought him from death to life.
The root of why meth took a root in me. Nothing else ever hooked with me. No drinking, no crack, no cocaine, no marijuana.
Because a lot of times, a lot of family members, that's one of the biggest struggles that they go through is being they have to go hands off sometimes, and a struggle of that.
Won't go back to living life where I was living dead. Harden in my heart, the more I give into my flesh again. Instagram, see all the highs.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to DTL Podcast, From Death to Life. This is a space where we share real stories of redemption, real stories of transformation, and the God who brings life into the darkest of places. Today, I'm sitting with someone who not only experienced addiction firsthand, but now leads men out of it every single day. We know him as PJ around these parts. Pastor Jason, welcome. I'm honored to have you here as our first guest. Thank you for being here. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So before everything changed with addiction, what was your childhood like?
Well, I started early with an adoption. Adopted at age 2. My birth mother, was an addicted woman herself. 5 different kids with all different men. I was born addicted, and I was given up to the system. Actually, I was taken away to the DCF system, the CPS system, where I was put up in adoption, and where it was reported that when I was in these foster homes, I was neglected as far as being talked to, held, or engaged with. And so my emotional separation anxieties and different things started there during that time of foster home and abandonment. But God had a plan to bring me a good family, in which he did, and I was adopted at age 2. Now, this family was good. It's not like the normal story where you hear in a testimony where, my family abused me and did drugs and all these things. No, my family was a good family growing up. They owned their own business. They taught me right and wrong. They modeled how to work. They modeled how to save money and to just live a good life in California. And it was beautiful. And for me growing up, I didn't know it until later in life that I had developed these emotional separation issues from when I was separated early in childhood. And so what I noticed growing up was unhealthy attachments to people, unhealthy attachments to friends. And I grew up as an only child as well. So this added to the emotional thing. So I remember that when friends would come over and hang out and they go home after, hanging out or whatever, I'd cry. And I never knew why I cried. And this led to more attachments to attachments to relationships and to girls and these things that caused a lot of dysfunction and hurt in my life. And I think I'd never really understood that. But growing up, I was good until all through high school. All these things got okay grades. I was an okay student in a sense. I was even part of what you would call peer counseling in high school, and this was an elective course that would teach peers to how to counsel students who are going through maybe drugs or suicidal thoughts or these things. And that's where I got my first inclination that I may be good at being a good friend or good at caring about others or counseling of these things. I loved being a good friend and bring hope to people. Even in high school, I just never knew that God eventually would turn that to what it is now. And so I didn't do the party scene. I didn't do none of that all the way through high school. Again, I was a good kid. But when I moved out for the first time and found the party scene, curiosity killed the cat for me. And so that's the first time I experimented with, meth.
So before we get into that, go back to, so you said in high school, they had you help other kids that had suicidal thoughts,
Mhm.
drug addiction. At that
Mhm.
time, though, you didn't have any of that with you, right? At that time, you didn't have any suicide thoughts or drug related or nothing like that.
No.
You were just there to help them.
They're just to help at that point. Yes, sir.
Wow, that is kind of crazy you mentioned that because you guys will hear and when we go into the end of his story, why that means something now
Mm,
that God would have used that in high school to something that he's doing today. And again, stay tuned because we'll get to the end of the
mm,
story. But so you said mentioned you were only child. Now you said you were adopted too.
Stockton.
And so when you may not know this because you were at the age of 2. Did your biological parents have other children?
Yeah, I have 4 biological brothers out there in which, I've connected with a few of them,
Okay.
ancestry DNA, and, here's another God's hand story on me is that none of them are doing good but me.
Wow.
Some are in trouble legally, some are depressive and on antipsychotic meds and just not functional in the way that God has brought me to, and, so I consider myself lucky and loved by the Lord that He introduced me to a family who would love me, and the detail of that is I was the only one adopted. The rest of them grew up in the system.
Okay. That was gonna be my next question. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
you're the only one that was adopted out of those. So when you were growing up, you touched this a little bit, but did you feel like something was missing?
Mhm.
You said you started to feel attachment, you said, or something, like, kinda go into that of how you were saying that you started to go after girls because you were feeling you were missing something.
Yeah. Well, there was something missing in my heart,
Mm,
obviously. I just couldn't put my finger on it that this hole in my heart was something that only God could fill.
mm,
We hear many people talk about these things that we chase things in life, and we fill it with drugs and women and all the things of this world, materialism, to try to fill this heart, this hole in your heart. But for me, it was like the hole was to try to feel being loved and
right.
accepted and whatever else comes with that.
So
And
did you think you felt kind of abandoned because of your birth parents? I know you did you were at age of 2, but at some point in time, were you told that you were adopted? Then that kinda did it kinda start to change for you?
yeah, I knew I was adopted early because I remember pictures. We had a book that had me signing my own adoption papers,
Okay.
so I knew that I was adopted early, but I just never knew what's normal to feel, what's not normal to feel versus somebody, these things. And I didn't realize it until later in life that the lack of engagement when you're a kid and when you're young, like at the developmental stages of 1 and 2 and stuff like that. Like I've also heard that I didn't walk until really late in life. And when you don't engage with like a baby crying and stuff like that, that it creates this separation anxiety, this lack of emotional development in a child, which I didn't recognize until later. But I had such a good family that I think I had a lot of support that I was able to stay afloat without counseling and stuff like that. But looking back now of on how many unhealthy relationships I had pursuing and crying over things I shouldn't cry over, and the type of emotional side that I had growing up pertains to a lot of that.
Right, okay. So that's what I was kinda getting at. So that was good that you mentioned that. So now we'll go ahead into what you were about to touch on is you kinda get into the party scene. Now, this was in high school?
Right after high school.
Right after high school, okay, so
Yep.
you graduated high school at this point in time.
Yeah.
So, when did things start going in a direction you knew weren't good?
So, the funny thing, if you look at my life, there's also some other insecurities when I was growing up that because I had a hard time keeping friendships and relationships, I kind of didn't like myself. I kind of quietly body shame myself because I was a little bit overweight. I played baseball all growing up through high school, all the way through T-ball to high school. I barely made the team. That created a lot of insecurities of these things, and I felt like growing up and friends, I felt like everyone would take advantage of me. I was always the good friend
Mm,
or too good of a friend guy or these types of things, and so when I found methamphetamines after graduating from high school, for some odd reason, it began to lie to me. It began to help me drop weight. I started to find confidence. It started to help me defend myself differently and not get so emotional, and all these things. And that's where we see the root of why meth took a root in me. Nothing else ever hooked with me. No drinking, no crack, no cocaine. Marijuana, just methamphetamines was the only thing that engaged my life, and that would be part of my life for the next 10 or so years. Would be this methamphetamine that would lie to me. And for me, I was functional for my first couple of years. As an addict, I was able to keep it. I was working servant jobs and different things, and I would go to work and all these things. But just like anything, it slowly steals your soul from you. And that's when I began to steal from other people and do different things that would begin to create in me a monster that would take control for the next decade.
So you mentioned some other drugs and alcohol. So have you tried other things, and that you said
Mhm.
that was the only thing that stuck was?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've tried, I've tried it all basically for the most part, and it's just for some odd reason, methamphetamines for me. I don't know if it was just the way that it made me feel, or the fake security that it brought, or losing weight, or all that, or maybe it just didn't make me care about what everyone else thought about me.
And that was going to be my next question. You kind of just hit that, was what lies did addiction convince you were true, and they say it was like a falsehood. Like
Yeah.
you're saying that you were, you're on good health now because you're losing weight, right?
Hmm.
And that you felt more power. You felt like you weren't being taken advantage of. You felt
Hmm.
like, and all that you mentioned were just false lies.
Well,
And
what's funny is, they call methamphetamines a Superman drug, that's what they've always called it, thinking, yeah, it amplifies somebody physically and all these things, but for some odd reason, it amplified me mentally. And it engaged a lot of my insecurities and filled in a gap where I've never felt like those gaps were ever closed up before, and those insecurities and some things. And so I would almost shamelessly say I fell in love with it. It became a love-hate relationship
mm,
down the road, and just like with a lot of these things, because it brought benefit, but it also brought destruction.
what what did a normal day look like at your lowest point?
Well, I would say obviously things shift over time of these things, is it takes a very slow, for me, it took a very slow bite out of my life. Like I said, I was functional for a while. Uh,
You were doing this for 10 years.
yeah, well,
Functional
altogether.
for 10 years, right?
No, I would say functional for about 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
2 to 3 years, maybe less, until I finally got busted for the first time. And once I got busted for the first time, everything, and then your parents know about it and all these things, and that's where everything begins to start going downhill once your secret's out.
Right.
Because once your secret's out, everybody knows, and your parents trying to hold you accountable, and you just not able to live up to the standard because you're hooked to the thing, and these things, and you just constantly part of knowing you're breaking your family's heart, and seeing them know that they don't know what the heck to do to help you, being part of that, and then eventually you lose your job and these things, you get on probation that you can't complete because you're using, and then you're starting to steal. When you lose your job, you're starting to steal, and the person that you steal from is normally the people that care about you most. And that's one of the biggest regrets that I have in my life, was when I stole from my parents. I remember that I stole a very expensive necklace out of their safe, and it's so funny because we get convinced that we can get away with something like that. And I go to the pawn shop, and whatever I pawned, this is so long ago. This is 2000, I don't know, 6 or so, and and I remember my mom calling me multiple times on the phone, like, "Hey, did you take this? Hey, did you take it?" And I tried to blame it on our housekeeper, like that was going to work. How intelligent am I at the time? But the shame of that caused me to disappear from them for about 9 months. So I never answered her call after she knew I was lying, and I disappeared. Disappeared for 9 months, living with another addict and his dad, and the shame kept me locked into these things where I couldn't face those things, and that's where I saw a lot of my lifestyle go way downhill, living on couches, living in a place where everyone's abusive to each other, and just shooting up drugs. And just, I never did that, but just being part of that lowly life that I just never, it was also interesting to me because it wasn't a life that I had lived growing up.
Right.
So it was a whole new experience. for
And
me to
you
be part of.
pretty much was an adult at this time before
Yeah.
you started because you said you graduated high school
Yeah. I
at
was
that.
probably 20.
So everything kind of happened on the back end,
Yeah.
um, and there was no real reason why it would have started. Like there's nothing that would have. Well, was it? Was there something that triggered for you to start going out and hanging out and going to parties and doing
Uh,
things?
s-
Because you obviously searching for.
well, I grew up. I don't know if my mom would agree with this, but I grew up a very strict household.
Okay.
You know, I didn't go out to parties. I don't know. I can't really remember if I really wanted to. I probably did because I wanted to be engaged with, but like my curfew was 9 o'clock at night and stuff like that. And so I didn't really have the chance to probably experience in high school. But when I moved out and I had 3 roommates in the house, and I had one particular person who brought all these drugs in there, and that's where I experimented for the first time. That probably 8 months in that house of drinking and all the different types of things and meth and different things, and it was really curiosity killed the cat, and wrong place, wrong time, wrong people.
So you mentioned for at least 2 to 3 years you were functional with it. What does that mean? Like what? Take us through a day. So you had a job,
Yep.
right?
hmm
So at what point were you doing the drugs? When you got home from work? Was it in the morning? Was it like at what point? Just take us through a normal day when you were functional.
So functional would probably be, I think, probably when I was doing a serving job, meaning to get tips at the end of the day. And that would just feel there's no worse job than being a server job that gets tips at the end of the day. And you just buy drugs. Yeah, they're right in your hand. So that'd be, getting drugs after work, right? Taking it home, you know,
And now this is
and
your home.
I was living in my parent
Right.
well, yeah, but there's times that I would go back and forth to my mom's, they'd let me home and different
Okay.
things, but, I just remember, keeping drugs in my pocket at work and going to the bathroom and lighting up and, or if I'm at home, doing the same, hiding it everywhere that I go, and different things.
This was in your early 20s.
This was yeah.
Okay.
This is where I had a little more grip on my life at that time, which would be dramatically different than after I relapsed, so I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yep.
This one wasn't as bad because I wasn't dealing drugs at the time, that's later. A lot different experience, to those things.
And you already touched on this, but when did you realize things had gotten completely out of control?
Yeah.
Go back into the story of it taught you to steal
Yeah.
from your loved ones.
Yeah.
Just kind of go back into that story.
And that's what led to finally needing some help at the tail end of this after 9, 10 months, I believe it was, if I'm thinking the timeline right. Uh, it was after I no longer had any resources of druggy friends that would no longer allow me to freeload off of them because I wasn't working, right? And so I'd come stay on their couch or these things or that, and I had nowhere else to go. And I remember I still had my car, and I remember sleeping in my car, and I remember posting things on Facebook. You know how we put things on Facebook looking for attention? That's someone to like it. Just like your post, even no matter how dumb it is, or write a comment, or I love you, or this or that.
That's probably 80% of people,
Right.
probably 90% of people on Facebook.
And when I realized when I posted a very heartfelt post on Facebook and like a few hours later, no one engaged any of it, is when I realized that if I don't change, I was going to be alone forever. Like that feeling of being alone is scary to me.
So that
It still is.
Is that when basically everything finally collapsed for you? Was kind of like that was
That.
your moment of like you thought you had friends who weren't really friends.
hmm
And then because you were so bad into the drugs that you start stealing from your loved ones, from your mom. You
Yep.
said you stole the necklace from her. And then you went away for 9 months because of the shame and the guilt.
hmm
And you just couldn't face her
Yep.
with it, right? Dealing with it because that's when they knew you were doing the drugs.
Yep.
And then it went to stealing, and then it was the guilt with seeing your mom and dad and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, did you ever feel like God was trying to reach you at any point up in that part of your life? Or better question, did you grow up in a church home? Did your parents go to church? Did you know anything about God kind of
Mm.
growing up or anything like that?
Not really. So my parents, we were kind of those holiday goers. Easter and Christmas, Christmas Eve and stuff like that for most of my life. I remember when I went into high school, maybe freshman, sophomore year, somewhere around there. I went to youth group. I did go to youth group, but I was there for all the wrong reasons.
Did you go there because a friend invited you, or just kind of like a neighborhood church kind of thing? Or is it the same church you went to like during the holidays?
The same church that we went to during the holidays. Yeah. I don't remember how I got there, but I just know that I went there, and I liked the worship songs, but I didn't know any of the word. I didn't know the engagement of the Lord. I didn't know the love of the Lord. And I know that I was there to try to catch a girlfriend or something. Yep.
All right. So you get the 9 months away from your family. You said you were staying with some other people. And then at what point, was there anyone who was reaching out or tried to help you when you were struggling? I know that you mentioned your mom a little bit.
Yeah.
That they were.
So I don't remember anyone really trying to help me because I didn't really want it. I wasn't searching for it. It's so funny because, your sober friends, they try to engage you and hang out with you for a little while until you fall off the map. And that's what I did. I just kind of let all those ones go because those are the ones that judge me and would tell me otherwise, not to do what I was doing. And so all I did would engage these friends that would enable or be part of my drug fueled habit. And so that's why I'm saying at the point where no one was engaging my Facebook post or answering my calls and my texts, that's when I knew that I had burned so many bridges, and that if I didn't change something, that my worst fear would come true, and that'd be alone the rest of my life. Which, if you think about that fear of being alone, if you think about that in my childhood fears, see how that engaged all the way through this of fear of abandonment and being alone.
And then you mentioned earlier, you mentioned this about you didn't even know it was there until it kind of revealed itself. And you mentioned, and you said it did it again in your later adulthood as well.
It's hard to engage it because when you're an only child and these things, you don't know what's normal emotions and not normal emotions, especially growing up in these types of things. And so I didn't realize that it was not normal until later in life when I got sober and going, teen challenge and different things and the people that I mentor today and counsel today, I see back now that was not a normal childhood growing up, not based upon how they developed me parental wise, but more so the wounds that I carried with me that I didn't know were impacting me.
You ever get caught, like, arrested for drugs?
I mean, I got locked up a few times prior to going into Teen Challenge.
Okay.
I say it my first time,
Right.
my first stint in Teen Challenge, you would say. Yeah, I had a few things of being arrested for possession and then thefts, right? I would steal laptops from people. I would do different things that would get me engaged into jail time and also community service and different things and probation. And I kept just violating those because I could never stay clean enough to do what I needed to do to complete those legal orders against me.
Okay, so in the middle of all that, when did God become real to you?
So
You can kind of go into also how you found adult teen challenge. Like who's the person that reached out to you for that?
So that moment that I was sharing about when I was in my car alone and realized that if I don't change, I'm gonna be alone the rest of my life,
Right.
is when I finally got the courage to call my mom. And at that time,
Now this is after the 9 months that you had left.
disappeared. Yep.
How long was it? Was it at the end of those 9 months, or was
Probably it was at the end of that 9 months.
Okay.
That's kind of my triggering point to when I went into Teen Challenge. And so the way that worked is my mom would not let me home when I called her. You absolutely cannot come home. But she says, I know a place for you. And if you want to engage this family and be part of this family ever again, you got to go there. Right. And so,
Did she ever tell you how she found out about Teen Challenge?
yeah. So back when she was in high school, back then, Teen Challenge was a lot more able to go into the school systems more so than now. God in school doesn't work very well anymore, unfortunately. So she remembered when she was in high school that Teen Challenge came and did a drug prevention program at their high school. And she says, I know of this place. And when I was a kid, they came and spoke. And she says, if you want to be part of this family and change your life, you got to go there. She didn't tell me that it was God. She didn't tell me it was Jesus. It was just a rehab. And at this point, I've never been to a rehab before. I've never done, even to this day, I've never done anything besides Teen Challenge as far as rehabilitation, quote unquote, of these things. And so I remember she let me come home for a few days, and then they took me to Teen Challenge.
And so that also kind of blows my mind a little bit of how God works, because your mom saw something when she was a teenager in high school.
Mhm.
Your adopted mom,
Yep.
not knowing why at that point in time she, probably didn't think about anything at the time because she didn't go through. At least I don't know if she did, but did she ever go through any kind of drug addiction like that?
Nope.
Okay. So for her, she didn't need it, right?
Mhm.
And she's probably wondering, why are these people even here? Right.
Mhm.
Fast forward 20, 30 years later, you're now an adult, and she goes back to her being in high school
Yeah.
for Teen Challenge and saw that program. That's how God works.
That's, yeah, I was gonna say that's why the God lays the
Yeah.
footprints and the
And,
imprints on people.
and people, and that's the whole, you're probably going to hear me say this a lot, but this is the whole point of this podcast, is that God works, and they say it all the time, but God works in mysterious ways, but there are moments that blow your mind of how God can work, and
Mhm.
that's one of them. Is that your adopted mom saw something when she was a teenager in high school.
Yeah.
She didn't know anything about. Was like, what? Why? What? At that point in her life, she never thought she would even need to know what that
Yeah.
program is
Yeah.
until her adopted son comes and struggles with it in her adulthood, and she remembers it, calls you about it, says, "This is where you need to go."
Yeah.
And again, not a faithful churchgoer, doesn't really know
Mhm.
about God that much about it, and somehow God still found that program for you. And
Yeah.
it goes back to that scripture. He knows you before we're even born.
It's true.
He knew everything about what you needed
Yes.
and put those people in your place to bring you
Yeah.
to Teen Challenge.
I'll share this. I believe during my first set, I'm doing sets of when I was using. My mother found the Lord during that first set.
Okay.
I know that she was part of a lot of support groups for people that had kids that were, like Al-Anon. I don't know if she went to Al-Anon, but something similar. And I think that's where she finally realized that she had to take her hands off of me, that she had no solution along with my father,
Right.
you know. Uh, and that's part of the feeling that I have now is how grueling and hurtful it is for families to have to sit there and watch their loved one literally die in front of them, physically, spiritually, all these things, and know there's nothing they can do about it. And I still have that heart for my family. My mom, my dad's passed on, that she had to experience that. But I think, and I know the best thing that came out of it is that I know she found the Lord. And I know my dad found
That's
some
awesome.
help into that, and that's why it gave her the strength not to enable me to come home and try to fix me again. Now she says, "There's nothing I can do for you. I'm giving you into God's hands."
Right.
Even though she didn't tell me that, probably she didn't tell me that. Not that I remember the Teen Challenge was a place with Jesus, but she knew in her spirit that the only way to fix me was to give me to God and took me to Teen Challenge.
And we're going to get into that part of your story as well, because it all ties into it. Again, your journey of how God has said the footprints of where He has brought you from into what you're doing now. And you mentioned that you have sympathy for those family members who have to,
Mm,
the back end. And like I said, like we will probably never know how hard it was for your mom to say, "I can't bring you back here." As
mhm,
much as she wanted to
mm,
bring you back, but she knew that the better option was for you to go to Teen Challenge and go into this
yeah,
program because, and again, she may not have fully known it 100% why, but God was working with her at that point in time.
yeah,
But the struggle of that, because a lot of times, a lot of family members, that's one of the biggest struggles that they go through is being, they have to go hands off sometimes. And a struggle of that, of like, that's my kid, that's my
yeah,
son, that's my daughter. I can't just, I'll see them, like you said, physically and spiritually dying
yeah,
and have to sit back and just say,
yeah,
God has to do
yeah,
it. They have to go through this program. They have to go away for a 6 month or a year program. We're going to go deeper into that in a little bit about the program. But like the struggle of that family member having to do that,
yeah,
at that time you knew nothing about it, but now that you're on the other end of it,
yeah,
it brings you closer to your mom to know,
yeah,
like thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because without that, who knows where you'd be right now.
Yeah.
All right. And obviously, we mentioned God has footprints and God had it on, in there to do it. But she could have easily said, no, I'm going to
Mhm.
bring you back home. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to,
Yeah.
who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. And my father's involved in this too,
Right.
and for him, they worked as a team, and I know how hard and strained it can be between a father and mother because one would want to help, the other one says no. And the strain that even addiction brings on to a marriage, you know, uh, because, a lot of people are different in how they love and think they can help their loved one come out of addiction and different things.
And
And
it's probably even harder when the addiction is your kid,
yeah.
not each other in the
Hmm.
marriage, right?
Hmm.
Because then it brings a whole, like you mentioned, because people cope with things differently. But when it's the mother and father who are trying to deal with it with their kid, and
Hmm.
that can put a strain with their marriage,
Yeah.
it makes it almost worse.
It makes wedges
Mhm.
because, especially if they have different opinions on how to approach a loved one and addiction. You see from time to time, now I'm not saying my family did this, but that, moms would slip money to the son
Mhm.
while dad didn't know, or this or that, or something like that, where you see addiction start to cause dishonesty in a marriage, just trying to help their son,
Right.
and especially with differing opinions on how to help. Because usually there's one that's gung ho, don't help him. The other one's like, I gotta help him or he's gonna die. And you have these two extremes of mom and dad, and it causes a strain on the marriage because of our addiction problem.
Right. Told you go to Teen Challenge.
Mm.
So go ahead and kind of pick up from there.
Sure. Yep. So she told me to go to Teen Challenge, and I remember the day that she dropped me off, and I had been up on drugs for who knows how long, and I stepped into this place in San Diego, California, Teen Challenge, and I'm surrounded by people who were smiling, laughing, hugging each other, and encouraging me in these things. And it was such a light and day thing that it kind of weirded me out. And I remember trying not to stay. I wanted to go. I was not used to being around joy or being around people where I thought everyone was fake. So, for me, I was used to people judging me all the time. I was used to walking into stores and I'd have my hoodie up, and the store workers would be following me around thinking I was going to steal from them, or the cops always looking at me funny when they were driving by me, or all these things. And so I go into this place and all of a sudden people want to shake my hand and give me a hug and glad you're here. Jesus loves you this, Jesus loves you that. And it kind of scared me at first. And so I didn't really want to enter the program that day, but luckily my mom had the strength to say, "Hey, you're staying."
So for the people who don't know what that program is, go ahead and tell everybody, because now you know what it is, obviously. But when you at that point in your life, you had no idea what you were getting into, right?
Mhm.
But now you do know. So go ahead and tell. You can look into there and just let people and tell people what the program is and what it's all about.
Sure. Teen Challenge is a 1-year faith-based residential program. It is a global initiative, a global mission that you more than likely have a location in your state or even nearby. But it's a 1-year intensive. Some people call it kind of like a half Bible boot camp, half military boot camp because there's rules and there's disciplines. But it's all infused with the love of God. It's all infused with biblical discipleship, classes, and counseling of these things. And it's a year long, which is usually puts off a lot of people because it's so long. Most people are used to a 60, 90-day easy fix type of thing. But Teen Challenge is not that, because Teen Challenge wants to change the heart and the mind, which takes a long time. But with Jesus, anything is possible, right? It says in the word that with man it is impossible, with God it is.
One of the things that I've heard recently about Team Challenge is that it's 1 year and people feel like that's a crazy amount of time, but it's 1 year where you get the rest of your life back.
Well, if you think about it,
It's
the ch-
you're not losing that at 1 year, you're gaining your whole life back.
yeah.
Just For people out there that are listening to this, and we just kind of stopped at that length of the program, right? It's 1 year, but honestly, 1 year is not. Once you balance things out, and once you're talking about eternity as well, 1 year is nothing. So anybody out there that are like, oh, I can't do 1 year, you can and you should do 1 year.
If you think about the traumas that people carry, the things that they carry deep in their heart and all the holes in their heart, especially for people that a lot of people coming out of addiction and these things have a lot of abusive backgrounds of these different things. And it takes a long time for the Lord to reveal some of these deep holes and behaviors and habits. There are times that we don't see a particular issue in a student until their ninth, 10th month. And sometimes it feels like it's a little bit too late to address, but it's not. But like there are some things that are deep down in there that we have learned to mask, we have learned to pretend, we have learned to put on.
Yeah.
Right, and not show the weaknesses of who we are or the depravity as well that we've allowed ourselves to be part of. And so it takes time for us to engage such behaviors, and it takes time to change habits. It takes time to change mindsets and the heart. And then it also includes on how engaging the person going through it is as well. You have to you have to have a willing heart, a willing mind to allow the word of truth to transform them in a sense, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, it's good. So now that we have touched on what the program is, and we also are going to in the description, we're going to have a link to you guys' website, so anybody can click it and learn more about Adult Teen Challenge. But let's take it back to your story. So you've entered the program, and I know that the one here in Baltimore was a 6 month, and then we moved it, and then you guys were able to get it to a year one. Was the one in California, was that always a year one? So when you went there, it was still a year program?
So yeah, and kind of the old-fashioned teen challenges. Some places have what they call an induction phase and then a training phase. In California, they have the induction phase, which is 4 months, and then they send you off to what they call the training phase. Is usually at another center
Okay.
For the following, was it 8 months?
8 months. Okay.
Yep.
So you were at the one in California for the 4 months program.
4
at
and
this
yeah,
time.
yeah.
At this point, you were entering into the 4 month program.
Yep.
Did you know it was a 4 month program when you got in there? Or did they tell you how long it was, or do you remember?
I know my mom telling me that it was a year long.
It was a year long. So she told you
Yeah.
it was a year long.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what was the hardest parts of beginning that recovery?
Mhm.
You mentioned it a little bit, talked about like how you thought people were fake. Just kind of go back into your mindset of the beginning of your first recovery.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think going in, you are kind of scared of everybody. You're kind of always doubting everybody, always looking for an angle from everybody. Learning to follow authority after being your own authority for a number of years is rather difficult. Learning to trust people, trust that they have your best intentions at heart, or, that because I mean, life had taught me at that point that it's a scratch my back, scratch your back kind of world, and that no one loves without a cost. No one loves or cares without getting something first. And here I am in this atmosphere for the first time where love is giving freely. And I remember probably for the first 5, 6 days, I slept most of the time coming down from meth. And I remember I'd wake up in the middle of the night and people would have their hands on me, and that was different. But they were praying. They're praying for me for my recovery, that I would know the Lord, that my body would start feeling better of these things. And that was weird to me. I was not used to such compassion from people and care and love. And so when I finally started to get my gears about and I got out of bed and started feeling better, now I had to face the educational things where we'd have to learn to memorize scripture. Things I didn't really understand, I didn't use my brain for how many years to memorize, and like using meth, you're putting holes in your brain. So
Right.
that's everyone's excuse when you start facing the educational phase of Teen Challenge. Like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not educated, or I can't memorize anything right now because of the drugs and this and that of the sort. But I remember when I started trying and these things and God began to heal my brain, I began to do things I thought I couldn't do.
And so, and for people out there, you still had to go through detox, right? I mean, it's a mindset of it didn't just magically go away, right? You enter in this program as a whole new place, new people, but you still went through detox,
Yeah.
right? And but do you think? I'm trying to think how I want to say it. So, do you think it was easier having people have your back going through that? Because
Sure.
you mentioned how you felt lonely and how you put out a Facebook post and there was nobody there for you.
Mhm, mhm.
And now you're in this program where there are people here who actually want to talk to you and they're
Yeah.
welcoming you and all that kind of stuff. So, did that help you with it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it did as soon as you decided or figured out that it was real.
Right.
You know, detox is one thing, that's the physical, right? Of coming off these drugs and these things. But what a lot of people don't think of afterwards is the mental things that you have to get through, the mental lies, right? The things that you've picked up along the way about how you believe life works or how you believe people are or these things, and it's a bunch of lies based upon what you've learned in your life or how people have treated you or how you view the world, creates a very difficult engagement with people. It doesn't matter how genuine or godly or Jesus that they are, but you have to deal with these types of things where you have to find courage to trust people. That's hard for some people. That was hard for me to learn how to trust people, that they weren't in it just for themselves, but they were actually for me, and come to find out they were for my soul, to lead and bridge the gap to get me to Jesus, right? And I like to share this is that if people didn't love right on the front end, I would have never been bridged to Jesus.
Right.
Right? I didn't know anything about Jesus. I didn't know the love of Jesus. I didn't know how to get to Jesus. I didn't know any of these things, but it was by the caring and loving of the staff who didn't judge, who but wanted to hold me accountable and to love me. And they were good models of that, along with the students. Some of the students who had already found Jesus along the way and they were doing well and were learning to pray for new students coming in and these things. They were literally bridging the gap so that I could meet Jesus. And that's
Yeah.
so important in our life, that we have people loving us right to bridge the gap until I'm ready to accept Jesus in my heart, because I have so many disbeliefs, not just towards people, but towards God too. Right. And so you have to be prepped in a sense, along with the Spirit of God, to prep you to that moment where you're saying, Jesus, come into my heart. And I did that while being there in San Diego Teen Challenge.
All right. And then so you mentioned your first time. So go into what happened.
Sure. So 23 years old at the time when I go into Teen Challenge, young man, right? With all the dreams and aspirations of the world, American dream, all these things. And so when I graduate induction, I go to what they call the Castle in California to finish out my 8 months. I do an internship, which is another phase for people who feel called to the ministry or want to learn leadership skills. And I did that after graduating originally, but I had a lot of pressure to kind of go home and to go back to college and to take the family business, rightfully so. That's what any mother, father would want their son to do. And, at the time I kind of wanted to do it too. I didn't want to stay in my internship. I was more interested in going back out into the world and do the American dream. And so I did end up leaving my internship early, although I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was called into ministry, but I ignored it. I ignored it. I did what I desired and what I wanted to do, not what I should do. And we see that a lot sometimes in Teen Challenge when people, when we ignore the call of God, the results aren't good. And that's what happened to me.
This story was so impactful that we didn't want to rush or cut it out. So we decided to split it into two parts. Come back next week where we go deeper into Pastor Jason's story. You will see how God fully transformed his life, but not until he had to look up to see rock bottom. But like I mentioned in the intro video, we'll be praying out every episode. So that's what I'm going to do now. Pray it out. Lord, thank you for what you've already done in our lives. I ask you to reach out to that person that feels alone, abandoned, or lost. Let them feel your presence right now. Let them know that they are not alone, that we are here for them as well as you. Let your spirit touch that person that doesn't know what to do next. Show them the path to recovery and straight to you. In the name of Jesus, amen. So with that, thank you for joining us this week. This is DTL from Death to Life podcast. We will see you next week.
And you know what? I'll share my testimony with people. I'll go out and share Jesus in the workplace. That's what I thought. I was deceived because I only wanted to bring a little. I wanted to do what I want to do while bringing Jesus to it, instead of allowing Jesus to lead me what he wanted. And God's love through affliction and storms. And I remember that song sung over me at that first time in Teen Challenge before I had lost everybody in death, all that. And I ended up relapsing in Arizona after trying to get clean. Ended up breaking into the business, stealing the $7,000 where I was working. And then I go back to California running from the law.